Live. Good evening, and welcome to the July 19th, 2017 meeting of the Economic Development and Housing Commission. Tonight's agenda is available on the counter, along with request to speak cards on the west wall. A reminder to everyone that request to speak card shall be completed and turned in to the commission clerk. If you wish to speak to the commission regarding any item on tonight's agenda, please write the item number on your card. If you wish to speak on an item that is not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of this commission, please do so during the general administration section of tonight's agenda. All speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and televised. So all speakers, in order to be recognized, must be called to the chair, by the chair, and come forward to the microphone. Speaking in public may cause some individuals to be uncomfortable, so everyone is asked to be professional and respectful at all times. Vice Chair, Commissioner Price, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mayor Baldwin is here this evening, and he would like to address the commission.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm Christopher Baldwin. I'm the mayor here in the city, and I wanted to chat with you about a project that we're about to undertake, and we're doing it on a matter not on the agenda because it just came up, and we're about to get started on a project that's we're sprinting towards its completion. And the project is the city's entry into the Bloomberg Mayor's Challenge, which is a national competition around city innovation, which was launched at the end of June at the United States Conference of Mayors, and which we are going to be participating in and submitting an innovation proposal in October, which is just around the corner when you think about the process of developing such a proposal. The competition is among cities of 30,000 and above around America, and the top 35 of those cities' proposals are selected as champion cities in January, and they're invited to participate in a series of support workshops and help and design sessions to try to test out and improve their proposals even further. So each of those 35 champion cities will win $100,000 in order to do some of the preliminary work and testing around their ideas. And then later in 2018, 5 of those cities will be chosen as the winners. They'll each earn $1 million for their innovation project, and the grand prize winner city will earn $5 million for their project. So it's not a trivial project. It's part of an overall investment by Bloomberg Philanthropies of $200 million in advancing America's cities and our impact and our effectiveness and our innovation. So that's the basics of the concept. Now, this is the second Bloomberg Mayor's Challenge in the United States. There have been several in the last few years in Europe and Africa and South America, but the first Bloomberg Challenge of all was in 2012 here in the U.S., and we were one of the cities to compete in that process as well. We were one of the very few small cities that participated then. And some of you were members of commissions at that time, and the city engaged in a pretty deep, robust, fun process of developing proposals for innovation. And I want to give you a sense of what some of those ideas were, to give you a flavor of what we're talking about here in terms of innovation, because I'm thinking about innovation in terms of a specific discipline about thinking about improving impact and service and value and effectiveness of what we do in the city. It's not just doing something new. It's not just doing something more, and it is almost certainly not spending lots and lots and lots of more money that we don't have. So in 2012, we convened, we had just launched the notion that West Sacramento would become a global food hub. And everyone laughed in the region that such a thing was not possible. We had some significant global food enterprises here in the city, but we declared in 2012 that we were going to now plant a flag, and this was going to be a major part of our economic strategy going forward. And so we decided in the Bloomberg Challenge #1 to focus our innovation process on food innovation. So we convened a food innovation task force comprised of folks from Raley's, Farm Fresh to You, but also from the Center for Land-Based Learning, with which we didn't have a relationship back then, food justice groups, hunger groups, a wide variety of actors around the community and in the county to help us think through. And we went through a process called game storming, which is essentially just a facilitated way of drawing out concepts around innovation. What we ended up considering were things like some crazy ideas. I think John Robinson was participating in some of these, but we consider the notion of, well, what if we're trying to deal with food access and we're the home to Farm Fresh to You, which delivers community service, community-supported agriculture boxes of produce to individual homes, and they're able to provide produce at a low rate because they're doing it in bulk and they work with local farmers. They're the largest operation of its kind in California, and they're headquartered right here. We said, well, what if we could get it to every house? What if we could instead buy enough produce in order to deliver to every single home in the city and treat fresh produce as a public utility? Mm-hmm. And because we already go to every house in the city every week to pick up garbage, what if we picked up garbage and dropped off fresh produce? We would be able to drive the price down of the food. We were able to serve every food desert in the community in a reliable way. We'd be able to, then once everybody in the city had the same box of produce, thinking about recipe development and sort of thing, the sorts of things that sometimes are barriers to the use of fresh produce could be overcome. So it's a crazy idea, and I think we might have won had we submitted that, but we didn't choose that one because we didn't think we could implement it within the time frame of the Bloomberg Challenge. The political and other issues around that one turned out to were suggested they might be too challenging for us. So we didn't propose that one. We had other ideas that were, look, there are folks in our community that want to start restaurants or some sort of food operation, but it's so expensive to get started. So you may be someone in the neighborhood that sells tamales, and she wants to start her own place where she's doing that as a real micro business. But in order to begin, she'd have to do it and launch a commercial kitchen. You can't just sell food out of your own home under the county's food regulations. So she'd have to start a commercial kitchen. That's a $500,000 investment just to start. You probably don't have $500,000 if you're thinking about a micro enterprise as a tamale producer. But if you did, that's everything you have. You have to quit your job already to do it because you've invested so much. We said, well, we have a lot of commercial kitchens in the community that are unused almost all of the time. Commercial kitchens that are at schools, commercial kitchens that are at churches, commercial kitchens that are downstairs here at City Hall that could be used by people on the weekends or at times when church or school was not in session. What if we had an application that would allow folks to connect, essentially like Airbnb, connect people who could use a commercial kitchen on a short-term basis on non-peak hours to connect to available, empty, vacant, unused commercial kitchen space. And we thought about developing a phone application in order to make that connection possible. We ended up choosing not that one either. And instead, what we proposed was something called the Grow-Tel. And the Grow-Tel was trying to bring together several different things all at once. And the Grow-Tel happens to be squarely within the footprint and the scope and mission of this commission. The Grow-Tel said, look, we have the same problem with the commercial kitchens and people want to start restaurants and all of that. We also have a problem that we had heard about for the very first time, that the farm workforce pathways in our region were in danger. That even though we're the most productive agricultural region in the United States, that the times when you became, if you got your farm main management workforce from your family, and so you became a farmer because your parents were farmers. You learned to farming with your parents as farmers, and then when you were ready to take over, you inherited the farm. And it was a very simple, straightforward, all-American pathway that has been broken because so many young people living on farms are not interested in becoming farmers any longer. And so we learned about programs like the Center for Land-Based Learning, which had farm academies to train people how to farm, so they could learn. It substituted for growing up on a farm. They could learn how to do it. But there was still one problem. When they were done, they had no capital and they had no land. And so they had the skills to farm, but the essential matching of those skills with the availability of land and capital wasn't there. So we said, we were unaware that was even an issue in the urban part of the county. So we said, how could we deal with that problem? How could we deal with the restaurant problem that I just described with the tamales? How could we deal with the fact that for many families in the community, they're coming home from work and they got to get home quick. and the best and only option is to stop at a traditional fast food restaurant to get food for kids, because both parents are working, nobody's home cooking an elaborate home cooked meal, and fast food is the only option. And we wish there was something else, but there wasn't any other option. So those sets of problems in the food space. So look, we also have a problem. We have a lot of empty spaces in our main commercial corridor of West Capitol Avenue, and probably a market surplus of motels that were made sense in the market when West Capitol Avenue was the highway to Sacramento and San Francisco. But once the freeway was built and they were marooned, we probably have an oversupply of motel space in the city. So what if we took all of those things and put them together, and we acquired a motel and turned it into a grow-tel, where we would take some of the common areas of an existing motel and convert them into farmable urban farm space, where we would take some of the living space in the motel and devote them to on-site farmers. Who would be able to grow at that location, live at that location in order to reduce their costs, and convert some of the other space to commercial kitchen space that we could incubate restaurants and other food service providers on a rolling basis. So we might have we might create an incubator restaurant on the site of that particular motel. That on Tuesdays was Chris and her tamales, and on Wednesdays it was somebody else doing something totally different, in a way that Chris doesn't have to quit her job in order to try to become an entrepreneur in that way. And so our GrowTel concept was kind of cool, because it brought a whole bunch of different problems together in ways that the solution to each one reinforced the solution to the others. I think in some ways it was one of the best examples of innovation as opposed to just like doing something new, but really thinking about problems that were difficult but in completely different ways that supported multiple objectives at once. So we didn't win that time. If there had been a 35-city round, I think we would have been pretty solid, because we got very strong reviews for the GrowTel proposal back then. But they didn't pick any cities of under 150,000 back then. Mm-hmm. This time they're committed to having a diverse range of cities, including cities of our size. So that background is simply for the purpose of saying that's the sort of work that we want to do over the next couple of months in order to generate our best idea for the Bloomberg Mayor's Challenge. We'll be doing, we're still putting the whole process and the dates and all that together, but we're intending to do a citywide open submission as one part of this process, which we did not do before, inviting everyone in the community to come up with their best ideas and their best thinking. We'll be asking a set of innovators and change makers, folks who can put an innovation hat on, to come for essentially a summit to think through some of these challenges in more disciplined and structured ways, in addition to the submission itself, and then possibly a sort of an innovation fest that's kind of a hackathon-like thing towards the end, where we start to really dive into some of these and live into them for a bit and then test them out before we put our submission in. Probably not with the same focus, that laser focus like we did last time of food innovation, but perhaps picking some particular areas of focus. Homelessness might be one. Age-friendly, which we'll be talking about later this evening, might be another. But to pick a half a dozen or some number of topic areas that we're focusing on, but not just a single one this time. So as we go through that process, we'll be asking you and folks in the community to help us generate and evaluate and think through and criticize and build out those ideas with some guardrails around what we're trying to do here. And I think, so since I got you here, and I'm inviting you to put your hats on as well, we really are thinking about structured ways of thinking about innovation. And so one useful way to do that is what we did in that process before. We started off with what are the big problems and challenges and opportunities in the city, but then we said, okay, let's take 20 minutes, and that problem we just put on the table of farmers not being able to get land or whatever, if you were Uber, how would you solve that? Right? If you had the Uber, with the tools and the resources and the model that Uber has, what would you do? Okay, now put that aside for a second. Now that you've done that, now let's look at that as if you were Airbnb or some other lens that kind of forces you to think about the problem in a way that you hadn't thought about before. As opposed to thinking, well, what have we always tried before, and what if we just tuned that up a little bit? What if we took a completely different approach that accounts for things like excess capacity And there's lots of things in the city where we have excess capacity at some times, in the same way that you would have with your house at Airbnb or with your car through Uber. There's lots of things in the city that are unused a lot of or most of the time. And so that model of thinking about some problems has real potential as a way to induce a more disciplined and structured way of thinking about innovation. What we won't really be looking at are things that are just spend more money. So, when we put the call out, I know we will get folks who will say, the innovation we should have is add sidewalks to Jefferson between here and there. That will not win, right? We know how sidewalks are, how they work, what they are. They exist in every single city around the country. So they won't break new ground. They won't be bold, and they won't be learnable in terms of what other cities can draw from our experiences. And they cost money. And the Bloomberg Challenge is a single investment to help us take an idea and make it real with the notion that idea then must be sustainable, and ideally that'll result in improved efficiency. And so once you take the filter off of, okay, we don't want ideas that are going to end up costing us more money on a permanent basis, a lot of stuff will go away. So I would encourage you to also, if you take the challenge with us and start to think about these concepts, to really to kind of dig in and really think about these issues in different ways. Maybe ask people that don't normally think about this. That you know or that you work with. Ask your 7-year-old daughter, ask your coworker who has no idea what the city does, and you'll get mostly crazy, unworkable, impractical ideas. But you might also get the Grotel, or you might get some of the ideas that did win in the 2012 competition that have had the effect of really transforming the cities in which the winners live. So that's the challenge that's out there. There is a website out, and I forget the exact name of it, but if you just Google Bloomberg Mayor's Challenge, you will find all of the details that are out there at this time. We have been selected as one of the cities to have a special visit out by the Bloomberg Innovation Accelerator sometime probably in August. And we'll be inviting a set of, I think we're allowed to have about a dozen of the city's leaders to come to that piece, but that will be for the purpose of helping us build out the process by which we engage the community in this. So happy to answer any questions if you have them at this moment about it, but we're excited about it. We learned a lot about the 2012 challenge. Even though we didn't win, it did ultimately lead to our whole urban farm initiative in the community. It led to a renewed attention to the motel standards and some of the other issues in that space, and to partnerships with some organizations on micro-entrepreneurship as well. And so even in the process of not winning, it changed the way that we do business in the organization. We didn't used to have a deputy city manager who led our innovation work at all, and also changed some significant public policies and services in our community. So we're looking forward to it, and if there's questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Commissioners?
A quick question, Mayor. Did you say what idea did win in 2012? Just so we can. Do you remember by any chance?
There were 5 winners in 2012 as well, and one of them was a Providence reading. The purpose of it was to try to get to a certain number of words. I want to say something like 20,000 words that a child would hear in Providence by age 2, or don't quote me on the numbers, but that was the basic structure of it, using a set of technologies and delivery mechanisms that hadn't been used before, but this as a citywide commitment, not a school commitment, as a citywide commitment. And then Santa Monica had a program, which I actually never heard how it went, which makes me think it probably didn't go very far, that was in the homelessness space, but I don't recall the details of it. But the Providence piece was then picked up and replicated all around the country. I've been to several of the labs that followed those initial winners, not so much to try to do what they were doing. Most of them weren't things that would match up well with us, but to really to see more about the process and the levers of innovation that we wouldn't necessarily think about here. That whole garbage truck CSA box thing is a completely radical, almost certainly infeasible, but I still have this in my head in case if the moment arises. But those sorts of things where you're thinking, wow, we already have this whole thing that we do, because we're thinking, how could we possibly get food to a house every single week? We're like, well, we're already going there.
Right.
And it's those moments of aha that I think are really exciting about this kind of a process, even if they don't lead to the proposal or to the winning itself. It has changed for us at City Hall. And for the stuff that comes before you, it's changed the field of possibilities that we work in.
I agree. Thank you.
Very exciting. Thank you for giving us a heads up on it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions, Mayor.
Oh.
What's the timeline for submission on this grant? It's a grant application, I'm assuming? Or?
It's I guess in some sense it is a grant application, it's a competition, and I mean, we want to win the competition for the purpose of winning the grand prize of $5 million would be fantastic. You're getting a $1 million prize and international recognition of one of the 5 winners of the Bloomberg Challenge would also be a big deal. Frankly, even being one of the 35 champion cities would be pretty significant. So I think of it less as a grant, although it is. You're exactly right, and more as a competition to kind of get us in battle mode and bring our A game to the table around innovation.
Yeah, that's all I do is grants, so it's something I'm.
And for your direct question, we submit in October.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
And then in January, that tranche of 35 champion cities is announced.
okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
All right, moving on with our agenda. We entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the May 17th meeting.
So moved.
Is there a
I second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, that motion passes, so minutes are approved. All right, our next regular agenda item is a presentation of a draft age-friendly action plan. Ms. Robinson. Commissioners were asked to hear the staff's presentation and provide feedback for the draft action plan.
Good evening. I am here to summarize the age-friendly action plan that we've been working on, and I'd like to start by giving a quick background kind of on the process that we used to develop the plan, and then I'd be happy to take any questions and listen to your feedback. The origin story of this plan really comes from the fact that, and the council's recognition, that the population of older residents in West Sacramento is growing, and in the region and in the industrialized world. And that has really profound implications for governments at every level in terms of how they provide for the needs of their residents. Because as we age, our needs and wants stay, pretty constant in terms of what human beings need, but our means of achieving those need to change frequently, and cities need to respond to that or risk losing the support of their constituencies. So in 2015, the council recognized this trend, and the approach that they chose to embark on was to join the AARP network of age-friendly communities. And that's essentially a commitment that participating cities make to look to do a rigorous self-evaluation process and a rigorous community outreach process to look at what are the public policies that are in place that make the community a livable place for older residents, and how can those be improved. And it should be noted, really, that the city, unlike some of the other participants in this process, was already doing a pretty good job with its age-friendly work. The Parks Department has a number of different programs that focus on seniors and active aging, and a lot of the work that the city has been doing, including work that's seen by this committee as part of your purview, is directly relevant to the age friendliness of the community. So really, for West Sacramento, this was about systematizing those efforts and institutionalizing them and improving them consciously over time. So the process was, there's a five-year cycle once you join, and you get the first 2 years to work on your plan, and we're now at basically the end of that process, and we're ready to present the draft plan to the City Council at its meeting of July 26. So we've been working on this for quite a while. As to guide the process, the City Council set up an advisory committee. This was very innovative in itself. I'm not aware of another jurisdiction that's taken this approach, where the council appointed Mayor Pro Tem Johannesson and Councilmember Sandine to chair an advisory committee that included representatives from all of the advisory commissions. And Commissioner Price was your representative, Commissioner Campbell was your alternate. So the idea there was that this process lead not just to a list of projects and a kind of a to-do list, but also that it create an ongoing lens through which, this body, the council, the other advisory commissions, and even the, staff and the community look at everything that the city does, in terms of how it affects older residents. And one of the core principles of that is that in so doing, you make the community more livable for everybody. So an intersection that you make safer for an 80-year-old person to walk across is also safer for an 8-year-old person to walk across, and everyone in between. So that's one of the guiding principles. So as part of that, there was a self-evaluation process that included a number of different meetings among staff, but the real work was in the community outreach. So AARP very generously funded a statistically valid mail survey that went out, and that had 400 respondents to it. And that is especially useful. That would have been very expensive for us to do ourselves, and those results were nice because the results of that survey can be extrapolated to the entire population of the city. And the other survey work that we did is more anecdotal because it was smaller and the samples were not random. But we did, in addition to that, we did 2 town hall style meetings that we invited folks to come to that were convenient for older residents. There were 11 meetings of the advisory committee. Mr. Price endured those. There have been 6 advisory commission meetings. This is the final one of those. We did a mail survey the AARP mail survey that I mentioned. We did an online survey that was advertised on our social media and our website for seniors that have access to the internet. We did a phone survey that we advertised through a utility bill insert in 3 languages, and that invited people to phone in and leave a message. And then we also did a hand-delivered survey that we put on the lunches of Meals on Wheels recipients, and then the people that delivered their lunch picked the survey up the next time. And one of the really interesting insights, and this may be obvious to all of you, but it was it was new to me, was a lot of us realized that we were thinking of the older population as kind of this monolithic voting block with one set of interests because they shared an age group. And one of the insights from this plan is that that's not at all the case. The results that we got back from these different instruments varied and showed a wide range of different interests among different subpopulations within a group of older people. So as an example, the Meals on Wheels recipients, their responses focused heavily on healthcare and access to healthcare and doctors and clinics. And some of the other folks who maybe are not experiencing the same kinds of issues focused a lot on transportation and mobility, recreation, all kinds of different issues. But it really underscored the diversity of the population of seniors in West Sacramento. So the results of all this is the plan that's attached to your report. There's 20 recommendations in there. We tried to be responsive to all the different constituencies that participated in the outreach, and you'll see with each implementation item, there's a list there that describes kind of the provenance of that particular item. So what survey instrument or what outreach instrument resulted in the feedback that generated, that project proposal. Several of the projects in here are directly pertinent to the work that you folks do, so I'd call your attention to item 10, which talks about pursuing more supportive housing for the homeless. Item 13, that addresses or suggests that the city continue to work towards more affordable housing in general for people in West Sacramento, so that folks can have a place to age in place no matter what their situation in life. Item 14 addresses or seeks to address the pursuit of more resources to fund age-in-place grants for homes so that folks can put accessibility bars in their bathroom and different railings and things that allow them to stay in their homes and age rather than have to move somewhere else as their needs change. And then item 20 talks about continuing to pursue the city's ongoing interest in walkable neighborhoods, infill development, mixed-use neighborhoods, which, while not on its face an age-friendly effort, has profound implications for people's ability to stay in their homes and walk just to get the entertainment and the services that they need. So, ultimately, the focus of the project, physically, and as you look at the document, is around those projects, and we have a number of different mechanisms in there to promote accountability and try and assure that this document will not be one that sits on a shelf, but it'll be actively utilized. But as I mentioned before, that's the plan itself, and those projects is only one outcome of this project. One of the more important ones also is sort of the increase of awareness that we're hoping to create and to really get like I said, staff and the commission and everybody focusing on age friendliness, not just for individual projects, but as any issue comes forward to this body or wherever, looking at how that issue affects older folks and using that as part of your decision-making criteria for everything that the city does going forward. That's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners? Peggy?
Well, this is just so much information that you have gathered, and I'm really impressed that, that you went to the extent of gathering as many sources of information as you did. I really don't have any questions. The report is so thorough. There's nothing that I can think of, so I'm going to pass to Chris. Thank you very much for the presentation and the commitment to our elderly population, because I plan on aging in place, too.
There you go.
Thank you, Commissioner Bell. Commissioner White?
No questions. I think, I love all the infographics in it. These are awesome.
Thank you.
So,
Yes,
If I may.
go ahead.
a couple of years ago, those of us commissioners were invited to the Rivercat Stadium. The AARP hosted an event for, it was for West Sacramento's age-friendly population sponsored by AARP. I was one that attended that. So I learned a lot, had the opportunity to learn a lot about the needs of the aging population in West Sacramento. I think one of the biggest things that continued to come up was access to healthy choices for food,
Right.
walkable communities, transportation. Specifically one thing that came up was the walkable communities. So can you kind of just give me just an update on, what are current developments on the walkable communities initiative, or where is the city currently at with that?
Well, I think, I was checking to see if the mayor's still here. Yeah, I was going to say you have the expert on that issue. I thought he was sitting behind me, so I feel more comfortable now. Your whole, your economic development staff, works day to day on that. You've got your whole Pioneer Bluff area, which is planned to be in the future, a walkable set of neighborhoods. You've got the Bridge District, you've got the Washington specific plan area, all of which have, I don't have the details in front of me, but all of which have active city investments going into them to improve the infrastructure. There was that very large grant that went into the Bridge District that provided the backbone infrastructure that's supporting all the different development that you see there now, including the barn and all the different developments that are being built by Mr. Friedman there. There's another residential project, I believe, being proposed by the Unger family along the river that's going to have its own little beach on it. So there's a lot of efforts going on. Typically, the focus from the city standpoint is on putting down the planning regulations and installing the infrastructure that supports those. So I know there's a substantial grant being contemplated for the Washington neighborhood to go back in and retrofit improved infrastructure in there to support new development. So most of that type of development is focusing along the river, and the city is supporting that through a regulatory structure that facilitates those kinds of developments, and then actual, usually grant-funded and city-funded investments in the infrastructure that lowers the cost and makes it economically feasible.
Thank you.
Commissioner Price?
As Mr. Robinson said, I was involved in the advisory committee for this wonderful work product. Again, compliments to you, Mr. Robinson. But I will just reiterate what you said as far as the items that are specific to our commission, to focus on those going forward. I think they're laser focused, and if we could make an achievement with any one of these items directly related. In fact, the item on the agenda for the community development block grant, if we keep these items focused when we listen to that presentation, I think we will be miles ahead on achieving the goals of this document. Thank you.
So just a quick comment. I echo Commissioner Bell's comments. I think this is a very thorough and awesome report. Thank you. Going through it, I was actually surprised on page 15, where you talk about the Yolo County senior population growing. I really expected the bracket for 60 and up to be like a lot bigger, because I keep hearing, these boomers are just retiring like crazy, and then also aging. And I'm a Gen Xer. I think I missed boomer by, I think, 1 year. So I was actually surprised that the increase is not that much. Actually, it's like, it goes, it's been going, what, 2%, 1%, last couple of years, and 2020, it'll be 18.3%. So that was actually surprising to me, but again, thanks for the report, and a lot of good stuff.
Thank you.
Since we're taking turns, I'll go ahead and throw something out here. As I understand this plan will be integrated in the other planning documents within the city?
Yeah, a lot of several of the projects in here are actually sort of tweaks on things that the city's already doing, because part of what we had to do was avoid creating like a plan for new activities in every sphere of the city's activities. So, yeah, these things, there's none of them that I'm aware of that will require, for example, an environmental review or anything like that. So they are designed to be consistent with the existing policy framework of the city.
So in essence, if I understand correctly, they would inform traffic management?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything within this plan that is not covered by another plan? In other words, would initiate specific project activity and funding?
That would create a funding requirement, or that would create a
That would create a
cost and
project
expense?
requiring funding that would not appear in general or specific or individual components within the general plan?
Well, I think that those are kind of different things. I think there are projects in here, like some of them explicitly, the nature of the project is to seek funding. So they would, you would be sort of creating a need for funding and identifying the funding at the same time. For example, the accessibility grants item, I don't remember which item that was, but the one for retrofitting homes, we don't currently have a program like that.
Okay.
But the plan identified that we should. So the directive here is for essentially Louise and her staff to go looking for a grant program, and if they can find one, to develop a program that would utilize those funds.
Okay. And that's
So,
what I meant.
Yeah, we're trying to
Okay.
avoid like unfunded mandates, though. So if we're identifying a new activity, we're also seeking the funding to undertake that activity.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
Could I have another turn?
Sure.
Because I wasn't ready for my turn earlier. Speaking of that, I'd actually gone back through this. The item that's on page 18, although page 18 of the pictures, although the numbering's kind of weird. So it's like way back in the middle of page 18.
Oh, in the survey? Okay.
So this item in here that says, talks about repair services for low-income and older adults, and I would throw energy efficiency upgrades in there too, because that so helps with utility bills. You mentioned that part is currently not funded, and that seems like a really good opportunity for an innovation grant with construction training, some ease of getting permits, ways to repair these homes to keep people in their homes, because I'm also struck by the fact that today on Facebook, there was a post from someone who has Parkinson's and needed their doorways widened and couldn't find anybody to do it because they can't afford it, and was asking for volunteers to do it. And another friend an elderly friend who broke her hip, and the chances of coming back from that are so slim, and she tripped on a threshold in her home. And I just think that this is an amazing opportunity for us to focus on an innovation grant. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner White?
Now I gave since we're televised, I gave every other community in America the idea.
We're in trouble now. Mr. Robinson, I found, you said that you received 400 responses in the survey.
To the mail survey, yes.
For the mail survey. How did that extrapolation occur? I mean, how was that broadened to the community?
Well, that's just a statistical process, because the way that AARP selected the addresses was, done with the advice of a professional statistician that helped them do that randomly, so that everybody with an address in the city had an equal probability of the right age, right? So everybody over, I think, 45 in the city with an address had an equal probability of being in the sample. So when they constructed the survey that way, it makes it so that you can sample a small number of people and have a known probability of getting the same results as you would have if you had asked everybody in that age group in the community. So it's more of a statistical
Right.
methodology thing.
Oh, good. I was impressed by the high percentages of the people that are happy here.
Yeah. That was actually, I should have probably pointed that out, because that, we really did start from a place of, I think it was 89% of people in this age group in this survey indicated that they thought the city was, very good, or somewhat good, something like that, the good half of the spectrum. Almost 90% of people felt like that before we've done any of this. So it's a wonderful thing to know that we're building upon a solid foundation of existing age-friendly work.
Very good. Well, we appreciate the work that has gone into this, and thank you, commissioners, for participating in this effort as an advisory body.
Thanks.
Any other comments that Mr. Robinson can take with him to the council? All right.
Well,
thank you.
I guess I would just wanted to add, I think that health and well-being is super important as we age. And I know that the Parks Department has some really awesome programs, and I never did see that aspect, but probably because it's addressed already so well in the Parks and Rec.
There's an item in here that basically says we want to continue and expand those efforts.
Okay, yeah, I figured you had it covered.
Yeah, and really, I mean, to that same point, I mean, we're looking at also kind of a value chain concept. So, we, in many cases, we'll have a program, but we talk to people in the community, and they either didn't know the program was there, or they knew the program was there, and they indicated that they didn't have the transportation to get to the program, so they were frustrated about that. So we're looking at, having the programs, informing people about the programs, and in the long term, kind of helping to have transportation methods available that will help everybody, including those that aren't driving anymore, get to the programs.
Awesome info collected. Good job.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, I think it can also be used in a lot of multiple facets of evaluation going forward, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially as we
Look
get
at
into
data.
this innovative aspect
Yeah.
that the mayor's presented to us, and that is very exciting.
There's a lot of things in here that we could use $5 million for, so yeah, get your thinking caps on, please.
Very good. This becomes like the booklet to work from.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, next item on the agenda, item 4, is presentation by Louise Collis on the community block grant, or community development block grant. And we're asked to actually have a vote on this, a recommendation. So keep that in mind as we hear her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Louise Collis, Senior Program Manager with the Department of Economic Development and Housing. And this is something that you've seen, we've discussed before, but this is the actual document, and that is this year's annual action plan for the community development block grant funding the city receives from HUD each year. Actually, that funding started last year. So we are in the second year of a 5-year consolidated plan that this commission was very involved in developing last year. The annual action plan will say what we will do with our funds this year. We were beginning to wonder if there would be any funds because the CDBG program in the administration's budget was completely cut in the proposed budget this year. And actually, they were going to basically go backwards and cut this budget because the federal fiscal year started last October. So they were going to go back and cut that, but they did not. And they actually increased CDBG a little bit, so we actually ended up, when we came to you last time, we didn't know how much funds we were going to be getting. So that's why we're circulating a second draft, because towards the end of June, HUD finally got their allocation amounts out. And so now we know that the city will receive $446,077. So we got $429 last year, so we got a little bump up. Last year, we received approximately $100,000 in program income, so that's a very rough estimate for this year. Our CDBG program income primarily is in the form of loan repayments for housing rehab or first-time home buyer or business loans that we have done in the past when we had funding from the state CDBG program. And business loans are amortized, so we know kind of how much that's going to be. But Our first-time homebuyer loans and our housing rehab loans are all deferred payment loans, so we don't get a regular monthly amount. We'll get $50,000 or $60,000 all in one chunk when someone sells their house or they refinance and pay us off. So it's very difficult to estimate how much we're going to get, so that's a rough amount. But we estimated 100,000 last year, and we got 103, so we did pretty good. But this year, a lot of times it just depends on the financial climate. When interest rates drop, everybody refinances, and we'll get some payoffs. If interest rates go up, people don't do that, and we won't get payments for a few years. So we'll just see. So based on the goals of our 5-year consolidated plan, we came to this commission, to the Parks Commission, and we talked to all of the many agencies in the Yolo County Homeless and Poverty Action Coalition, and made some recommendations for funding for this year. The consolidated plan basically has 4 goals. Over a 5-year period, we want to reduce the incidence and impact of homelessness on our community. We want to move forward the goals that were in the Washington Realize strategy developed several years ago with a HUD grant that kind of revisioned the Washington neighborhood. We want to strengthen economic opportunity for our lower income residents and also move forward HUD's goals to affirmatively further fair housing. And I have to slow down every time I say that one because that one's a tongue twister. So this year, last year, we allocated all funding towards a park project in the Washington neighborhood because that was a part of the Washington plan, and that will pave and make ADA accessible the Riverwalk Trail from the I Street Bridge north up to the Broderick Boat Ramp, because that's currently just gravel and dirt, and so it's not really accessible. And it also doesn't have lighting, so anybody using it to commute across the I Street Bridge or to come from the Washington neighborhood down to the Tower Bridge has a very dangerous situation early mornings and in the evening. By October, it's dark in the morning and getting dark in the evening. So we'll be putting in lighting and a paved path and make it ADA accessible for wheelchairs and bikes. And that will be in conjunction with improvements in a couple of years that will be started on replacing the I Street Bridge with a new bridge between that side of the north side of West Sacramento and the rail yards area of Sacramento. So it's a component of that project. The current year's funding is proposed to go to goal number 1, to reduce the incidence of homelessness. And we're looking to develop affordable housing that will accept persons who are homeless or have recently been homeless. Several years ago, we did the Bridge to Housing program, where we took 65 individuals directly out of housing camps along the river and moved them into a subsidized motel on West Capitol Avenue. And from there, once we got them enrolled into benefit programs, enrolled into health care, and enrolled into mental health or substance abuse case management, if those things were needed, then work to place them into permanent housing solutions. What we found was there are usually not 65 units available in West Sacramento that are affordable to people on very limited income, and especially if they have bad rent history, any kind of criminal background, or they have mental health or substance abuse issues that might make them a difficult tenant to work with. It was very difficult. We had some wonderful landlords that did work with us, but it was a real struggle. So what we're looking for is a project where we can actually have services on site. It's called permanent supportive housing. It's not transitional housing. You don't move them there and get them stabilized and move them out. It is permanent housing, but it has the supportive services available for these folks who are difficult to house. And so that's where we would like to put the majority of the funds this year. And saving out some money for our fair housing services provider. We didn't do that last year because we were still under the final year of a state CDBG grant that's funding that. So we have Project Sentinel that provides fair housing services in West Sacramento. So now we're going to switch that over to our federal CDBG funds. And then the final chunk of money, which is quite a bit for general administration, but this year we are working with all CDBG recipient agencies in the Sacramento area to do what is called an assessment of fair housing, which is a HUD-required document. What it does is it looks at where low-income people live, where you have high concentrations of persons in poverty, where persons of different ethnic backgrounds and racial backgrounds live, and where you have high concentrations of those, and looks to see, is the housing that's available for these folks, is it located in areas where they have access to the things you would want for your family? Do you have access for jobs? Do you have access to good schools? Do you have access to transit? Do you have access to parks? And if not, we look at things that might be impeding that and obstacles to overcome, and try and make recommendations on how to either put housing in areas of where there is access, or to bring those services to those areas where HUD calls them areas of concentration of poverty or areas of concentration of minorities. So we're just getting ready to embark on that, and a portion of our general admin and planning funds will be going towards that. We hired a consultant who will be getting underway, I think, the end of the summer. And probably will be about a year effort, and I'm certain that this commission will be involved as we work on that. There'll be just a whole lot of data analysis and GIS analysis that will be involved in the beginning, and then we will start doing a lot of community meetings and going out and talking to people, saying, here's what we're seeing from this data and these maps. Now, what are you seeing on the ground? And are we missing things? And are there things that you would like to see that you don't have access to? And then we'll go back and work on the data some more, and then hopefully come up with a document that is on a regional basis addressing these issues, because a lot of these issues are going to be having to do with planning, metropolitan planning issues. And HUD has always made CDBG recipient cities do an analysis, what they called an analysis of impediments to fair housing, but you only did it for your jurisdiction. And it didn't always make a lot of sense. Just look at one jurisdiction. So this is a new process, and we're going to be one of the early regional ones. There's a few regions in the United States that have completed theirs, maybe 3 or 4. So we're going to be one of the more early ones, and we're getting really excited to get that underway. Did you have any? Well, I should also mention that CDBG funds. We never get enough money to do everything, so we try and look to see where we can put our funding to get the most bang for the buck, and use it to match for other funds, to leverage it with other funding, if possible. But we are not allowed to supplant local funds. So for example, if there's a program or project the city is currently funding, we can't say, well, I'll keep that general fund and I'll fund it with CDBG instead. HUD doesn't allow that. So it has to be something new or something that's a change. But we also have many other activities that we are currently undertaking or plan to undertake in the future that would be CDBG eligible. However, there are other funding sources available for those, and so some of those are listed in your staff report, things that we are currently working on. So did you have any questions about and I apologize for the format of the annual action plan. This is a HUD format that I cannot change. It doesn't let me change it, so some of the charts print out kind of wonky. I apologize for that, but this is just the way the program works. So thank you very much, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Collis. Commissioners, you want to step up? Yes, Mark?
Louise, quick question. I don't know if we've thought of this already ahead, but regarding that housing, you mentioned it's not going to be transitional, it's going to be permanent supportive housing. Are we going to be charging rent, and if we are, is that going to go into potentially more units down the line?
Well, the cities don't make very good developers. We're usually acting in the position of a lender. So we would find a housing developer who has experience working with hard-to-house populations, experience working with homeless persons, and permanent supportive housing to put this together. So usually, you're not, depending upon their funding sources used, tenants usually pay some rent, but if they're at the lowest end of the income scale, it's going to be a minimal amount. So I've never seen one of these projects make enough money to put that money into anything else. You're lucky just to cover your bills, So the thing is, we go out and find enough funding sources to put together to make the project work. And usually each of those has a rent restriction. Some of them might say that tenants can't pay more than 30% of their income. Others might say you can't charge more than a certain dollar amount for a one-bedroom. So you just have to look at the funding sources that we end up using and take the most restrictive, and that's usually how we set the rents. But in general, most of these projects do charge rent. It might be a small amount, but everyone pays their way. And so that's another thing you got to look at. If you're taking someone straight out of homelessness who may not have any income,
Right.
how do you subsidize their portion of the rent for a period of time until you can get them signed up for Social Security, VA benefits, and other things that they might be eligible for? So that's why we want to look for a developer that is doing this and is doing this well. That knows how to make that happen.
Thank you.
Commissioner, Mark?
Ms. Collis, thank you very much. Another great report here.
Thank you.
So I have a vague recall of CDBG requirements to do census tract analysis, poverty levels, and other types of factors. Are the programs you're intending to deliver directed to any specific regions within the city based on census tract, or those?
In our consolidated plan, the 5-year plan, that's where we do all that analysis, because those numbers really don't change year to year too much. But so you do your consolidated plan every 5 years. And so we did choose a region to focus on, and that was the Washington neighborhood. And so we have the goals in the Washington plan that we'll be putting some money towards, one of which is the trail that last year's money went into. But basically, if we're addressing homelessness, there are certain areas of the city that are most impacted, West Capitol Avenue and the Washington neighborhood being probably the two most impacted, although we do have homeless folks living in other areas. But those are the two that probably see the most impact, where we have homeless people that, do not have housing, or maybe they're living in a motel for a week or two until their benefits run out, and their Social Security only covers 2 weeks, and they live on the street for 2 weeks, which is a big reason why we see so many along West Capitol Avenue. And then the river is a big draw for people because of all of the undeveloped land where people can camp, and they have access to the river. So that goal does have areas that it will address, although they're not specifically called out in the plan. But the Washington neighborhood is one, and that's why we put the first year's funding into that trail.
Good, that answers my question, just with regard to targeting services to areas of need. Thank you.
Thank you. Great report. I'd just like to point out to the rest of the commissioners that both the age-friendly work product, and now you're talking about homeless, focusing on the Washington area, those two issues seem to come together in the Washington area. There's a preponderance of aged citizens in that area, and also the homeless. So to focus on the Washington area, Capitol Avenue, for both of these issues would be something that we need to look into to make it more livable.
Again, thanks for all of your hard work on this and all of the research that you've done. And I'm really happy with the decision to invest in creating permanent housing for these people, because I think that it is the most significant life-changing circumstance that can happen for a homeless person. Is once they have that stability, it's like everything else starts to improve from there. But if you don't have that stability with a home, you're never going to get stable. So I think that in the long run, this is going to best serve all of our community, those that are not homeless and those who are homeless, who eventually evolve from that to being a stable, contributing, or at least self-serving individual, as opposed to, being needy and at risk. So I'm really happy with this decision and looking forward to the projects that are going to come, and hopefully we're going to have lots of, more than 65 units. That's my hope.
Yeah, we put a goal of 20 units with the CDBG funds, but as other funding comes in, there'll be more units in our project, so. And so it does say 20 units, a minimum of 20 units for the CDBG funds, but as we get other funding, we'll be able to do more and more.
Yeah, I'm super excited for our city. Good job. Thank you.
It's going to be a difficult task, but I think this just happens to be an environment when they just built permanent supportive housing. They just broke ground in Woodland on, I can't remember how many units, like 20-something units. Davis has a project that they're kind of in the same situation we are, where they're under development. It's going to be not as big as the one we hope to build, I don't think. So a lot of times people are concerned that we'll bring in homeless from other areas. They already have a lot of permanent supportive housing in Sacramento. We will kind of be the hole in the donut if we don't do our part.
Commissioner White?
I'm really pleased to hear about the regional plan. I think that having that regional plan is going to help us a lot of leverage money for other projects. So much transportation and energy funding is going into disadvantaged communities. And so the more that we can really point to something great here, I think that we'll be able to attract additional funding.
So,
Commissioner Escobar?
yeah, we're in year 3 of 5, am I correct?
This is
In
the
year
second
2?
year
Okay.
of the 5-year plan.
So broadly speaking, what are the big changes for the 17-18 plan over the prior year plan? Whereas, what would the citizens see as the big changes this year?
Well,
relative to last year's
the 5-year plan is the 5-year plan, so there's no change in the overall goals, the 4 goals I mentioned. It's just each year we decide how's our funding going to work towards one or more of those goals. So if we can get by dedicating funds to permanent supportive housing project, once you've got those funds and you've allocated them, and you've got a resolution from the city council showing that that's a firm allocation, it makes it a lot easier to go after competitive grants, because then you've already got some match money set aside. So I would say a change from last year is just a change in the focus from the goal of the Washington plan to the number 1 goal, which was to reduce the incidence and impact of homelessness, and really moving towards that number 1 goal.
Thank you.
Okay. Excuse me. A couple of questions I have. Really appreciate all the effort from all the contributors to this over a long period of time. And it's good to see it's ongoing and really serving our community well. So you mentioned Davis, so so that's obviously a model, and we're looking at other models, success models, in how we go about lessons learned there to implement ours and in that vein.
Absolutely, and that's why we want to look at developers who have already done this and done it well, because permanent supportive housing is, it's a standard HUD term today, but honestly, it's only been around 4 or 5 years. It's not been around, the idea of taking homeless people directly out of a tent and placing them directly into a permanent apartment is different. If I had been standing up here 5 or 6 years ago, I would have been talking about probably a shelter or transitional housing. So we want to not learn from our own mistakes, but learn from someone else's. So take developers that have done this, they've fought through it, they figured out how to make it happen and have done quality developments, and there are some in the area. And there's a few really nice projects in Sacramento.
So we, excuse me, we have that opportunity, and we have a mechanism to implement that, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. How about the land? How's the land being acquisitioned?
Well, we're going to put CDBG funds towards acquisition because we want this money in up front. HUD has a requirement that funds be spent within a timely fashion. So if we put the CDBG into the construction of land or construction of a building that we're going to rehab, it gets spent first before we have to go into the construction. So the developer will probably be responsible, along with our staff, of looking for appropriate sites. And we might be looking at acquisition for rehab of a small apartment complex. We might be looking at vacant land and new construction. CDBG funds technically cannot be used for new construction, but they can be used for the acquisition of the land for new construction. They could also be used for rehab if we're rehabbing an existing building. Because the original intent of the Community Development Block Grant Program is not to do greenfield development, it's to improve inner cities and older neighborhoods. So they don't want to do new construction with CDBG, but they want to improve a neighborhood, so we can't do the actual construction costs.
So there's some partnering opportunities from an innovation standpoint as well, because you're taking perhaps property that an owner could be involved in doing a partnership with the city.
Possibly. I haven't looked into that, but that would be a possibility. Once we've got a development partner that we're comfortable with, then we'll sit down and start thinking through some of those. It's more on the part of the developer to find the site, but we definitely will be advising them.
You'll be setting out goals and strategies for that.
Absolutely.
selection process.
We want a quality product. We want a product that will be something we can all be proud of. And we also are looking for a product that has community involvement. We don't want to put a big fence around it and no one goes in and out but the homeless folks. We want it to be a part of the community. We want community involvement. We want the homeless folks that are living, no longer homeless, the recently housed folks that are living there, to be integrated into our community.
That's very important. Very good. So commissioners, any other comments?
Just one last question. Louise, you brought up community involvement. Do we have a strategy or have thought about how we're going to tackle any resistance maybe to a development of this type?
We have done a lot of work over the years. In 2013, we did a homeless study, and we had a lot of community involvement in that, a lot. We had meetings for 5 or 6 months with dozens of people that came over and over, people from various churches. We had people that were just, there's a homeless person that always hangs out on my corner, and I'm worried about that. We had people that work for programs that deal with homeless folks, or the food closet, they have a food closet, or whatever. We had some individuals that were just wanted to be there, wanted to know what was going on. So we did a lot of outreach and a lot of discussion around what West Sacramento wants to do about homelessness, and what are our concerns and what are our needs. So then from that point, we did an 18-month action plan that had, I think, 23 or 24 action items that we went through. So this is kind of an outgrowth of that. Is after we did that initial work, now we went up, then we did Bridge to Housing, which was an outgrowth of that. And now we're looking back at Bridge to Housing and saying, we can't take 65 people off the river every time and just find housing for them. It doesn't, it's takes a huge, enormous amount of staff time, and then there are some people that just can't get housed that way. So this is an outgrowth of that. So my hope is that with the outreach and the community involvement we've had in the past, we've already started that work in 2013,
Right.
4 years ago. We'll definitely need to continue it, and that is a good thought, is we definitely need to continue that conversation with the community.
Great, thank you.
Well, and those lessons learned in that process makes us a smarter developer in this process, as a partner.
I hope so. I hope so.
So, Commissioners, we're being asked to approve a recommendation to City Council for adoption of this 2017-2018 CDBG Annual Action Plan, including funding allocations for fair housing services, property acquisition for the development of affordable housing targeted to homeless persons, general program administration and planning activities for the CDBG eligibility activities. So do I have a motion?
I move.
A second?
Second.
Okay, Commissioner White, Commissioner Escobar, and further discussion.
When will we receive another update on?
Well, you will keep the commission apprised as to the progress of these, the CDBG activities, right?
The annual action plan goes to City Council for consideration of adoption next week. So that's why we're asking for a recommendation from the commission tonight. And in September, by September 30th, we have to submit our report on our first year of CDBG funds to HUD. So a copy of that report will come to the commission. So there's an annual report, it's called the CAPER, the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, if I remember correctly. So once a year, you'll receive a report on how many people were served, some basic statistical data on those folks, race, ethnicity, income levels, and how much money was spent. So that's how the federal CDBG program works.
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion?
So I think, do we vote on approving the recommendation? I
Yes.
think okay,
Yes.
so yeah.
Correct. And we'll do a roll call vote. Polly, you ready for that?
Okay. Oh, we just voted already. Okay. Commissioner Altamirano?
Approve?
Okay. Commissioner Brady?
Approve?
Commissioner Bell?
Approve.
Commissioner Campbell?
Approve?
Commissioner Escobar?
Approve?
Commissioner White?
Approve.
Great.
Commissioner Price?
And Commissioner Price.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Price.
That's all right. Approved.
Thank you.
Oh, so we have a unanimous recommendation to City Council on this item. Very good. Thank you, Commissioners. Moving on with the agenda for, let's see, our action items, general administration items, request for comments from commissioners. Do you have any other comments on at-large topics? No, hearing none. Okay, staff updates.
I have no updates for you tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner, if we could go back to the last item, I would like, one request is how we can be, as a commission, more involved in the proposal by the mayor to be involved in the innovation project. So potentially if we could have Aaron Laurel discuss at the next meeting how we can incorporate our
I think
ideas.
I think we're going to have a lot of opportunity here.
Okay.
This is going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
This is a very big deal. So I appreciate your comment, and we'll have staff forward that on to Aaron as far as our involvement in information. I'm sure there'll be a website probably dedicated or a website topic dedicated to this, and information flow is going to be very good, I'm sure. Or at least we're requesting that it is. All right, calendar of events. Our next meeting is,
Wednesday, September 27th at 6 PM.
okay. All right, so noted there. Any other calendar items? Okay,
The Friday Night Lights is coming up this weekend with the police department at Riverbank Elementary.
and what's the, where can we get more information on that?
It's on the city website, and it's also on the flashy sign on Jefferson Boulevard, but the police department does it once a month, and it's just an opportunity to come out and play basketball with the cops and have fun and other party games, and they have food trucks, and it's free.
Very good. All right, we'll make note of that, and anything else? All right, this commission is adjourned.